In the previous study, we ended with the following passages describing the spiritual essence of what the Garden of Eden symbolizes in the Genesis parable. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. What is the express purpose of a garden, if not sowing and reaping? Sowing and reaping, or the resurrection of the dead, is the core of Christian belief. For as Paul said, if there is no resurrection of the dead, then Christ is not risen. And if Christ is not risen, then our preaching is empty, and our faith is also empty. That pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? So, first, that which is natural. That is, the natural body or natural man. What is meant by this natural man? Paul gives us a starting point with the first man, Adam, calling him a living soul. And Christ, as the last Adam and life-giving Spirit, shows us what the first leads to. Just like the natural progression of a seed to a fruit-bearing tree, there is a necessary transition from our natural essence to our spiritual essence. Christ defines this transition in the following. Verily, verily, I am saying to you, if a kernel of grain falling into the earth should not be dying, it is remaining alone. Yet, if it should be dying, it is bringing forth much fruit. He who is fond of his soul is destroying it, and he who is hating his soul in this world shall be guarding it for life aeonian. Between a living soul and life-giving spirit lies dying or death. So think of it like this. When we enter this world as a living soul, we are a seed containing the potential for life, yet to be tapped and flourish. But before this happens, we must first fall into the earth and begin dying, or this life will never be realized. This is why we see Adam and Eve die in the Genesis parable. Yes, I know, tradition has long said otherwise, but I believe it's in error. Think about it. Death is a necessary stage in the process of living to life-giving. So why wouldn't the Lord, who instituted this principle, not bring this necessary part to bear as well? How is this dying or death portrayed? By the command to not eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. As almost everyone knows, Adam and Eve did just that, thereby introducing death into their being. Was the Lord surprised by this? Of course not. Wouldn't the one who designed and built the machine not understand how it works? So, death came because of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Does this tree represent? Well, first of all, it's not just any knowledge, but knowledge of good and evil. So, it applies to behavior, does it not? This takes us to the following. For by the law is the knowledge of sin. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? I would not have known sin except through the law, for I would not have known covetousness unless the law had said, you shall not covet. Friend, what is sin? Lawlessness. In other words, bad behavior as it relates to ourselves and others. Does this stress the need for a law? It does. And so it is that Paul says, by the law is the knowledge of sin, of good and evil, of good behavior and bad behavior. I would not have known sin except through the law. Knowledge, known, the law, it's becoming obvious, right? Now in 2 Corinthians 3:6, Paul calls the law the letter, states clearly that the letter kills. In agreement, Paul says this, I was once alive apart from the law, but when the commandment came, sin came alive, and I died. Oh boy, talk about a loaded statement. Let's bring this back to the principle of sowing and reaping or resurrection. What must a seed do before it can bring forth fruit? Die. This in itself is an indisputable law of nature. one that cannot be refuted. So not only is this true in the visible and physical sense, but in the invisible and spiritual sense as well. For what we say and do are both exercises in sowing and reaping. No wonder Proverbs 18:21 says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it, either death or life, will eat its fruits." So here we are. First, living. Second, dying or death. The letter kills. Sowing and reaping is clearly in motion, the process beginning the moment we're birthed into this realm. So, one must ask, what is meant by dying and death? Are we talking physical here? I don't think so. Please consider. To set the mind on the flesh is death. To set the mind on the spirit is life and peace. Here we are, brother and sister, the Bible definition of death. Death is setting our mind on the flesh. Doesn't this agree with the first outcome of sowing and reaping and the idea of corruptible and temporary? Yes, but we are flesh, so is it not necessary to set our minds on it in order to exist in this world of form? Absolutely. But what lurks beneath the surface of this mindset is the actual problem. Let's go to the following. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Remember, this is a parable, so let's consider it as such. When viewing the tree of knowledge, Eve noticed three things. She saw that the tree was good for food, pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise. Let's bring this to the following. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. As noted, good for food correlates with the lust of the flesh, while lust of the eyes with pleasant to the eyes. Strong's defines lust as a longing, especially for what is forbidden, derived from the root meaning to set the heart upon, that is, long for, rightfully or otherwise. But now here's a question. In Genesis 2:9, we're told that God made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, also corresponding to the desires of the flesh and eyes. If this is the case, then why, as opposed to the other trees, is the fruit of the tree of knowledge forbidden? Answer: it's due to the third element of make one wise, that which John calls pride of life. The ESV renders this pride in possessions, while the NIV renders it as the boasting of what he, or sinful man, has or does. Friend, all of us function by the desires of the flesh and eyes. In fact, the root of the word Eden means pleasure, indicating that it's perfectly normal to function this way. But note how John says it in 1 John 2:15. Do not love, and if anyone loves. Does love correspond to what we set our heart on? It does. For as Jesus said, where our treasure is, there our heart will be also. But here again, it's not what we love or desire, but how much we love or desire it. This is why my definition of pride is the inordinate love of the self. When our love for something is detrimental to ourselves and others, then we abide in death. But death is the carnal mind, and the carnal mind is the mind of pride. Finally, John says, he who does the will of God. This explains the fruit in Genesis 3:6, where Jesus said, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. When Adam and Eve took of the fruit and ate, they did not do the will of the Father, but the will of the serpent. What does the serpent symbolize? A haughty spirit, which goes before a fall. How did Jesus say it? The grain of wheat must fall into the ground and die.